Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, we'll be talking about a very large and powerful autumn storm that will be making its way across from coast to coast, from the west coast to the east coast. It will be very characteristic almost of a, I've said this in my last video, of a winter storm. I mean, if this was, say, a month later, right, on November 8th, this would have a very, very heavy snowy side to it, a prolific snowstorm. However, it's just too warm for that. There will be some snow with this, and just obviously not as expansive as it normally would be with sufficient cold air. So very, very interesting. It has a lot of characteristics of a classic winter storm, which I'll be obviously showing you. But also, you know, besides that, it'll have very heavy rain, and its impacts will be pretty significant. So I want to go over that and keep you guys updated on that with today's video. And here is, you can see a picture of kind of the anomaly that the European model is projecting with it. You can see it's a pretty strong system, has a classic south-southwesterly flow out ahead of it with that warm front, cold front, and it will be developing across the plains with obviously some severe weather. So let's start off though with the GFS model, and I want to show you basically right now what we have going on. And right now, as you can see, we do have that system still spinning across mainly Quebec and Ontario, Canada, producing lots of lake effect across the Great Lakes. There have been actually reports of water spouts across the Great Lakes, and that is not unheard of as you get these low pressures that are pretty much cut off their upper lows, and they are very vertically stacked, and that just basically means that things like funnel clouds and even possible tornadoes, if the dynamics were better, are possible. Now, obviously, with this, it's mainly water spouts that don't even make it onto land, but it's definitely an interesting thing. And of course, we have snow. But besides that, we really have calm weather. If you look at the National Weather Service Weather Ready Nation map, there's not much activity going on. The biggest areas of alert are practically this, to do with frost advisories and freeze warnings, which really aren't that big of a deal, as it's literally just frost. It's early October. It's not unheard of. And there's a few watches of flood across Erie and into the UP. Otherwise, I mean, it's literally possibly the calmest map you can get at this time of the year, which you know, it can be could vary significantly. So that is that with for now with what we have. But as you get into the first full week, I believe actually second full week of October, you can see we see this system make its landfall onto the west coast, and that's just one piece of the storm that's going to be impacting and creating this large system. So notice that happens, that it kind of gets torn up through the mountains, right? A lot of that gets eaten up, but some moisture does make it through nonetheless. We have a stronger system behind the initial front. You can see that's pretty strong, has a pretty strong wind field with it, dumping quite a bit of moisture across the northwest. Quite a system, you could almost call it a atmospheric river going on across the northwest there. But what we also see is, if you recall yesterday, we were talking about this system right here that's going to be making its landfall across Mexico. Now, this is, I believe, a tropical storm, or probably even a weak hurricane as it makes landfall in Mexico. Obviously, that's not going to impact the U.S. with any tropical conditions, but what it will do is open up the southwest to a moisture surge, and the winds to basically orient themselves to support a low pressure that would be coming from the west, which is exactly what we're having at this time. And it also has a lot of moisture with it, and that moisture will lead to quite a bit of rain across the southeast. So that's another area we're watching across. And notice this system, right, and it's kind of several little I guess meso lows and whatnot to do with it as it hits the northwest is still pretty far out towards the west on Wednesday, but we already have showers developing across the Midwest right there, and quite explosively. You can see into Missouri, Illinois. This thing will have a lot of kick and oomph to it, and be, again, partly because of this moisture that is coming from the south. Now, this directly moisture won't build into this system, but it opens up, again, the field to be kind of worked into this system. Notice the south could see quite a bit of rain with this thing as this high pressure kind of steers even more moisture. This thing kind of starts getting its act together. But also notice across Iowa, Illinois, this low pressure, which is a 987 according to the European model at this time, starts showing quite a bit of moisture. And the reason we have such profound warm level of action is because we have cool air here, and whenever you have warm air, which is pumping from the south, rising over that cool air, we often get kind of a saturation of the atmosphere, and we get precipitation that forms. And you can see that that is exactly what happens, and this line stays pretty darn stationary, and you can see this low pressure doesn't move much, and it's already raining across a lot of the Midwest there into Illinois, Indiana, just waves of showers through much of the day, say Wednesday into late Wednesday into early Thursday. We have mountain snow at this point, Yellowstone to Bitterroots into Utah, northern Colorado. We do see quite a bit of snowfall there with this system. The GFS is a more proponent of showing that snowfall at least yesterday. Now the European seems to be getting on with that. If you recall, the GFS yesterday showed a more northern scenario, right? So it's interesting the European now shows that as well. But if I'll show you the GFS now is a southern scenario. So it's weird. The models are jumping in and around, kind of taking their, I guess, each other's perspectives and holding on to them at various times. So notice this. Thursday to Friday, this is definitely concerning for some severe weather. That's a powerful cold front. Notice it's not directly connected all the way to the Gulf or any means of that, but they will be dealing with their own activity here. Look at all that moisture across Florida and Southeast. Definitely a lot of moisture. Notice across the panhandle of Nebraska, say into southern South Dakota, definitely will be some snow. How much it remains to be seen, but it does seem increasingly likely. Notice this thing spins off at 991, 990 millibars, which is a pretty sizable storm, and moves off into kind of southeastern Canada there through Minnesota and Wisconsin. But it does start weakening, but you can see that cold front definitely still powerful, and it does start becoming kind of cut off from the rest of the jet stream. We see strong northeasterly winds off the lakes on most of these lakes here, so there will be lake effect this time on the other side of the shores, which again is very characteristic of a kind of what a winter storm does when it passes these lakes coming west from east, which is another feature why I think this thing is so winter storm-like. But again, not much snow other than the plains there into the mountains. And you can see this thing kind of hugs the northeast there for a while. It doesn't really want to let go. So the European does show quite a bit of precipitation, especially where this system initially takes hold and spends quite a bit of time. So that's kind of Iowa and Nebraska area. You can see that where this thing directly tracks could be a lot of rain. Minnesota, 3-4 inches. Now these areas really need water, so that's definitely a good thing. However, you know, some areas, especially right there where those waves of thunderstorms could occur, there could be a threat of flooding with, 4, 5, several inches of rain. And obviously with snowfall, that's less of a concern because these areas are more used to snow at this time of the year, and amounts don't seem to be that ridiculous, at least as of now. But definitely, up to a foot, if not more, across some of these ranges, which is nonetheless a system of snow. And you can see there is potentially several inches out into the panhandle of Nebraska and to southern South Dakota. So that is that. Let me show you the GFS, as this one is slightly different. And I gotta say that I think I favor the GFS because it seems whatever the GFS does, the European kind of does a day later, and then the GFS shows something, like a trend or whatnot. The European takes a bit longer to catch on with it with this system, right? So again, as I said, the GFS was the first one to show this system. European wasn't. Then it ended up showing it. The GFS ended up showing a northern track. European yesterday was southern. Now the GFS is southern and the European is northern. So we'll see if the European goes back to the south as kind of the GFS did. So I'll show you what I mean by south. So again, we have that system moving in here. We have that southerly flow. We have that high pressure beginning to build, which opens up this kind of valley for alley of moisture. Notice very heavy rain for the Gulf states there, especially closer to the Gulf. Again, by Wednesday, Thursday, in terms of timing wise, the European and GFS agree this thing's taking off, producing quite a bit of, again, mountain snow across, say, Wyoming or Colorado. A concern for snowfall there. Notice the GFS, just like the European, does show quite a bit of Nebraska panhandle snowfall, and that's another thing that the GFS is more accurate with. Yesterday, it showed snowfall across the panhandle areas. The European did not. Today, both of them do, so that's, again, why I do believe the GFS has the better handle on this. Notice instead of, once the system does develop, right, again, similar cold front, both of them don't connect it to the Gulf, so that's similar. Strong winds on the northwesterly side. A lot of rain for Florida here as well. That's something I want to show as well into late Wednesday and into early Thursday. But this thing, instead of going through kind of northern central Minnesota, it stays further south, takes a more southern route, impacting more of Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and then eventually it does a little bit better job because it's further south, connecting with some of this moisture here, and it also ends up hitting the northeast. But just like the European, it hangs around for quite a long time there. Not nearly as long as what the European shows, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely notable. And the rain does seem to be heavy when it does stick around, but not necessarily as long as the European shows. So in terms of total accumulated precipitation, again, I do believe the GFS is slightly of a better handling. Now, does this mean this exact rainfall footprint will occur? Probably not, but it's definitely a more, I would argue, more realistic one than what the European shows. By how much? Don't know, but you can see there are several inches of rain across these areas, and you already see the darker purple spots. That's 4 or 5 inches, and for a global model to be predicting that, That's going to be, you know, probably realistically amounts in isolated pockets of several, maybe even double digits in some areas. As wild as it sounds, I do believe that's a possibility. And you can see in terms of total snowfall, it's also pretty significant, again, across the mountains mainly, but on the panhandles of Nebraska and Colorado, there could be some snow as well. You know, a lot of this is kind of a tricky situation with that snow because it's occurring in very marginal temperatures, and oftentimes with big storms, if you get very heavy rates of rainfall, the rainfall itself just cools the atmosphere, and then it gets tricked to that trick, but it turns into snow, and then that snow could, you know, either occur because of the precipitation occurring heavily enough, and you know, that's very hard to predict how heavy precipitation will be occurring, not to mention you know, how long that will occur for, because if that snow does start falling at very heavy precipitation rates, then it could accumulate very quickly. So there is a threat for snow here, and don't be surprised to see either an extreme upside or a downside in terms of the forecast. So, you know, a wide range of snowfall probability there across those areas. But again, no big, you know, I guess event for anywhere else, as this thing, it's just not enough cold air for this time of the year to produce a big snowstorm across these areas, at least not with the current weather pattern. So again, as I showed you, the National Weather Service Weather Ready Nation app doesn't show anything yet. Obviously, the system's still a little bit out, but I do assure you they do have their eyes on it. I've been reading their forecast discussions. I'll show you the Canadian model. This is a third model, a tertiary model. I don't like it as much. It's definitely sometimes good, especially if it, say, agrees with the European and GFS's outlier. Then chances are the European one is the one that's correct. In this case, you can see it does show that system pretty similarly. A bit further north shows heavier snow into Wyoming, it seems, and you can see quite a bit of snow right there, or rain across the southeast. And you can see that what it does is it does take a more northern scenario, so that would be more in line with the European, but it also connects it with this moisture to the south here, which none of the other models do, which is very interesting. And it also takes a very slow kind of riding track with this. So this could definitely be a scenario that we'll have to watch out for. By far, I think this model moves it out the slowest, and in terms of the total accumulated rainfall, you can see a bit further north than what the GFS shows, but a bit further south than what the European shows, so kind of in between. And again, some heavy rainfall amounts in here for sure. And you can see the southeast as well getting impacted. Total snowfall, again, pretty similar to the other models, but definitely heavier pockets across the areas that are elevated across Wyoming and Idaho and Colorado and whatnot. So that is definitely something I wanted to show you. We are getting to the time where the high-res models, like at the medium range ones, like the NAM 12KM, are beginning to show this system. They're only the beginning portions of it. Notice that across Wednesday we do have some of those showers developing across Iowa, Illinois by 1 p.m., right? And then 4 p.m., and this is as far as it goes, potentially making its way into, say, Chicago, northern Iowa, into southern Dakota, southern South Dakota, and really much of South Dakota, much of northern North Dakota. And then this is as far as it goes. So that's a NAM. The RGEM, which is kind of the Canadian version of the high res, it's usually, I would say, a bit better though than a Canadian global one. Even though it's kind of like its cousin, if you will. Again, you can see for the next few hours, or next few days, I should say, 48 hours, not much activity. We do start to see it quickly tick up across the northwest and across the south, though, as you get into Wednesday. And then into Wednesday evening, you can see it really ticks up across much of Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, and we see those bands developing out ahead of this system, which, again, you can see they're pretty stationary, so a lot of rain could fall relatively quickly in just a short amount of time. So that is definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on for, and we'll have to stay watchful for. This is a NAM 32KM, also a pretty good model, and you can see it shows some similar kind of events. So that is basically it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next episode. See ya. Bye.